welcome back to the Raw Selection Private Equity Podcast. Joining us today is Zachary Darrow, Chief Executive of law firm Darrow Everett and lead of the Private Equity Division. Today, Zachary's talking about their acquisition journey and the growth of the business and how they're adopting artificial intelligence. Zachary, if you can share with us a brief insight into you, please.
Oh, hey, Alex. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so Zach Darrow, I'm the CEO of the law firm Darrow Everett. I also lead our private equity and securities practice group. Been here for about 20 years. We started the firm about 20 years ago. Offices all up and down the East Coast, 8 of them to be precise. And anything else you want to know about me, let me know. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about the Darrow Everett growth journey and what you guys have been through. I understand made strategic acquisitions, but interested to hear about the journey so far.
Yeah, it was really interesting. We started the firm a little bit of a different premise than most. It came a little bit of a tagline. You know, we're a business that happens to be a law firm. So we were really focused on the fundamentals of a business, right? We always would hear the jokes about lawyers and doctors and being bad business people, but amazing at their craft. And we kind of went at it the other way by saying, look, we're going to presume we'll be good at our primary jobs, but we want to focus on building a business that is in the space of the practice of law. So yeah, I mean, kind of got a bunch of good hits along the way to learn some lessons. The firm was founded in January of 2007. We started out as a real estate and finance boutique. Shortly thereafter, the GFC hit, which was founded in real estate and finance. So lots of crisis there that we had to pivot and learn from. We came out of that, frankly, delving into the realm of full service law firms, so we could better diversify, picking up litigation and corporate practices. And that started with some acquisitions. My background before law school, I started as an executive at a now Fortune 5, at the time Fortune 100 healthcare company on the business side, not as a lawyer. Early in my career, I also took a little sidebar from law and ran a portfolio company of one of the world's largest hedge funds. So again, head was in business. What do we do when the markets change, issues occur, problems arise? We adapt, right? So we diversified as a full service law firm. We started to think about how businesses grow. We invested heavily in marketing. We invested heavily in learning who was doing what we wanted to do, and started really a stream of acquisitions. So more so acqui-hire and lift outs rather than, the traditional sense of purchasing a law firm. But learned a lot along the way, got a lot of good colleagues. Obviously then the next after the GFC was the pandemic. Shortly after that, we lost one of the firm's largest clients due to a bankruptcy, and we had to pivot from that. That's kind of when we adopted a more digital marketing and advertising platform for pursuing new clients and new opportunities. And then shortly after that, as you know, the interest rate run that occurred really impacting the both corporate practices and commercial real estate practices. I'd say most notably, we finished a lift out of 8 attorneys and all their support staff at the beginning of 25. And at the end of 25, we did an acqui-hire about 25, both of those giving us a lot of experience in how to grow through acquisition and expand our practice areas at the same time. But at that time, we'd already done a few, so it became, I think, really sufficient at what was the hardest part, which was integration. So I think we've developed a really good process for identifying good colleagues, bringing them in however structure it may be, and then more importantly, integrating them in a timely fashion so they become productive, they become comfortable, they're productive in their practice, and they're accretive to the firm's growth and productivity. And that's, I think, timing's everything. That's, put us in a lot of discussions with folks in the private equity side, which, as you know, it's become one of the hottest topics, private equity and law firm growth. So that journey's kind of led us to a very interesting point in time, and we're relevant for the discussion, I guess, by happenstance, but nonetheless, in the discussion.
So just focusing on that journey before we dive into the link of kind of professional services and private equity, and obviously that of law. Professional services, see, coming from running an executive search firm and seeing many good, bad, and uglies, probably more so of the latters. is particularly hard to do acquisitions because of the people-centric nature of what we do. What have been your biggest learning points from the events that you've been exposed to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a phenomenal question. It's a human capital space, right? So human capital intensive space. I think lessons have been learned along the way, first in medical, then in accounting and financial services, and now you're seeing it in law. I think the most important lesson that we've learned, at least as an organization ourselves, is if you approach it that we have two sets of clients, you have the best chance at attracting the top talent and retaining the top talent. And what I mean by two sets of clients is they're those that pay our bills and that we perform services for. But if the firm approaches it that we are providing a platform for our colleagues with which to operate from and invest in that platform and pay as much attention to that platform as you do to the day-to-day provision of services, I think that's really what differentiates us, and I think creates a lot of opportunities. So constantly thinking, if Alex were to join Darrow Everett, what are we affording Alex for resources on how he does his job, how he obtains new clients, how he retains his clients, how he attracts new talent to serve his practice. It's not something that should be done in silos, and that when the firm commits to it and the firm, approaches it as a holistic goal, it makes a big difference culturally, and it makes a big difference in satisfaction. And that retains the capital, which we refer to the human capital. It retains it. They're happy here. They appreciate the environment with which they've been provided. Then that makes them better service providers for their clients.
You also mentioned you post-COVID you diversified your marketing strategy. Now, professional services, if we look at, have been typically very referral driven. Who do you know? What do you know? Wine dine type scenario. Finance and accounting certainly in the UK is very much like that. I mean, it wasn't even allowed to. The accounting sector wasn't even allowed to actually market properly until recently in generic terms. What have you guys done? What were you doing prior? Was it that? And what have you done now that's obviously your new lean on from a client acquisition strategy perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think hand-to-hand combat, so to speak, that whining and dining and spending quality time getting to know people, developing honest relationships. I think was what we always did in the beginning, middle, and end, and it still has a very relevant role. I think where we've seen evolution and where we've evolved a little bit, or a lot of it, if you will, is one, again, taking a business approach to marketing. What is the ROI? Perfect example, conferences. Conferences can be wonderful. Conferences can also be loss leaders, or not loss leaders, just frankly losses, right? Um, who attended these conferences in the past? If we attended, what was our return on participating? Analytically tracking it, assessing it, and then making the decision for the next conference or the next year. We'll look at the last 3 years of attendees at a conference before we decide to go, and certainly before we decide to sponsor it. And if it's loaded with BD people, we typically won't go, right? If it's loaded with marketing people, we typically won't go. It needs to be a forum full of decision makers that can make a decision to say, hey, I'd like to work with Darrow Everett, and I'm selecting them. How we've really changed it is when the pandemic hit, we see the glad handing in the conferences were all really reduced to near nothing. Um, we, as an organization, really started to look at how we can utilize content driven digital marketing, right? And putting that content in front of target markets. So if you take a look at our LinkedIn, for example, I think we're nearing 13,000 followers. LinkedIn, you can't buy followers like on Instagram. And that's an extraordinary number for a firm of our size. And we had a conscientious effort to make sure our firm and our members participated, but also that we produced a lot of good content that is, kind of something we believe a client would want to read, or a prospective client would want to read, helpful, informative, bite size. And we invested in paid and unpaid pushes. So whether that be through LinkedIn, JD Super, Law 360, the goal was, if Alex was, interested in raising capital, Alex was interested in buying that building behind over your shoulder. Alex needs to know that Darrow Everett exists. Darrow Everett has expertise and experience in relevant practice areas and relevant subjects. And be on the front of your mind. Because, one of the things that the traditional marketing that you mentioned, that the glad handing, the wine and dining, it's still the same psychological premise, being on the front of the mind. Alex says, I just had dinner with Zach. He's a nice guy. You know what? We need a lease drawn up. Why don't we give Zach a call? There's a lot of good lawyers out there, but I just thought with Zach, he's on the front of my mind. Well, now we do it with content. And so it's real important. We're putting out, during the pandemic, we're putting out over 7 pieces a week, and now we try to do around 4 to 5 pieces of content a week, informative, really surgically dialed in so that people aren't saying, unsubscribe. I don't need 17 pages of nonsense, and try to be current, right? What's going on, whether it be AI, recent decisions, occurrences in the world, right? Things that are relevant, that we can help be an information source for people, be on the front of their minds, and hopefully be engaged to help them. We do discourage a little bit of the traditional older school marketing, like I say, conferences that are just to go to a conference, networking groups that don't have a good track record of success for business generation, right? We're willing to be honest with ourselves and with our colleagues to say that's not producing. Same thing. We're not going to be using a lot of Google AdWords search for what we do as sophisticated lawyers, right? Probably not the best use of our resources. So again, take a very business approach to it. Understand that we need to be dynamic and changing with the times. And then lastly, a lot of internal coaching. We really do a lot of idea sharing. We have a lot of forums twice a month to get together and talk about what's working, what's not working, and be able to bounce scenarios off of colleagues with various experiences to lend.
Nice. So talk to us a little bit about the kind of lessons you've learned from advising founders, private equity investors, operators on obviously their transactions and legal requirements.
Well, yeah, we've got a lot of experience with founders. I don't know if that's, because I'm one myself, but not all my colleagues are, but we seem to find ourselves in that saddle with founders quite often. And, I think working with founders, one of the things that we really learned as a firm is that a lot of founders don't invest enough upfront time to prepare themselves for what their ultimate goal is, right? A lot of founder approaches, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to do that when I have the resources to do it, or once we start to get some momentum. And then we find out that a lot of now I'm speaking more time first time founders. Usually they've learned their lesson in their second and third businesses that they founded. But in the first time around, there's this, oh yeah, when I get big enough, and we try to explain to folks, yes, it sounds self-serving because we get paid to help you with these things, but you are big enough. And the problem is once you get to your version of big enough, it's too late. And oftentimes steps can be taken backwards, right? Well, now you have a regulatory inquiry that you could have avoided, or now you have an audit that you could have avoided, or now you have that opportunity with an unbelievable customer, client, whatever your business does, and they say, oof, if you just were a little bit more structured, if you invested a little bit more in your infrastructure. So we found that, they're folks that know how to build, and they build for the future, and there are folks that know how to do, but that don't always build for the future. And those are two very different journeys, unfortunately. So we try to encourage folks to get ahead of it, talk to them about their goals, understand where they're looking to take it. Are they looking for an exit? How many years? What sectors? Are they looking to become a platform or an add-on? And help them have the tools and a foundation they need once they get there. I mean, I guess I say the other thing with the founders that we've learned in representing them, an ounce of investment of what we call make ready is worth many pounds of return to them. And what I mean by that is when they feel like they want to go raise capital, they feel well they want to sell, or they want to take an investor and um, do the prep work to get there. Best example I can give you is if we've worked with an accounting firm and we've run a preemptive quality of earnings review, we've reviewed their employment practices, we've done all that in advance. And yes, it's spending money with the right consultants or professionals. Then we go to market. A lot more confidence instilling when a buyer or an investor is receiving good answers as to why certain things are the way they are, or we've already corrected things. So it's a historical, maybe issue that we've since reconciled or resolved. So I think, founders are the least likely to do it, but if you can encourage them to, they benefit the most of what we call make ready work for when they want to either raise money, go to market for sale or for investment.
A quick break from the podcast to introduce Chief Outsiders. Chief Outsiders help private equity firms and their portfolio companies accelerate revenue and increase enterprise value fast. Their bench of seasoned growth executives aren't career consultants. They're strategic operators who've led sales and marketing inside real businesses. They embed directly into portfolio companies to drive growth from insight to strategy to execution. And when deeper capability is needed, their on-demand execution teams jump in to get companies to go to market without the delay or long-term cost of full-time hires. Everything they do is backed by a proven, market-tested methodology and an AI-native operating system built from more than 2,000 engagements, bringing collective experience to every initiative. Chief Outsiders have partnered with hundreds of private equity firms and even more than 500 portfolio companies to drive billions in revenue growth. If you're looking to accelerate value creation across your portfolio, visit chiefoutsiders.com. The Chief Outsiders growth starts here. Talk to us about that kind of future intersection of private equity, the legal services industry, and of course, the incoming or upon us AI kind of transformation.
Well, those are two big chunks, right? I'm going to bifurcate that into private equity and law, and then AI. Although you're right to say they intersect, they surely do. But I think one of the first fundamental points to discuss when you're looking at that subject or those subjects is the longest time, you probably know, Alice, that private equity is not allowed in law firms.
Yeah.
And similarly, in many states in the U.S., medical practice are the same issue, corporate practice of medicine concerns, and they work through it in most jurisdictions by utilizing, an MSO, managed service organization. Then accounting firms kind of have the same thing, that next evolution. Law, a little bit behind, some more scrutiny maybe, and maybe some concerns that using a managed service organization doesn't get you all the way there. Although I think carefully done, it certainly does. But Arizona, I believe it was last year, passed a statute that effectively allowed a alternative business structure to permit outside investment to law firms. I think KPMG may have been the first one that jumped in and completed a transaction in Arizona under the new law. And I think it led a spur of other states and other folks saying, well, we don't have what Arizona has for the legislative tool, but there's still this MSO concept. There's got to be a way to structure it that the business is not influencing the decisions lawyers are making in connection with their clients any more than if today Darrow Everett outsourced its accounting and billing and benefits, and there's business functions that many law firms already do outsource. So where that kind of transacted with private equity is law firms are one of the largest industries that has the capital constraints that it has. There's nowhere to go. You either have other lawyers that are willing to invest if you want to grow or add ballast to the ship, or you go to traditional banks, which, as we all know, don't underwrite the same way as private equity underwrites, particularly from the perspective of growth. So, by way of example, there's transactions that many law firms, ours as well, might execute that have a very modest investment, certainly nothing that's even going up to 1x EBITDA by a group of lawyers that join, or maybe even 2x, but that's something that again we've not seen. And private equity says, well, wait a second, I'm needing to enter marketplaces at purchase prices and 8x EBITDA, 9x EBITDA, 10x EBITDA, or more. What's going on here? Let's investigate it. Let's take a good look at it. In law firms, go back 20 years where Darrow Everett said, hey, we want to be a business that happens to be a law firm. That joke has a tinge of reality to it, in that private equity firms oftentimes bring great expertise in how to run a business and how to have operational efficiencies, how to have proper purchasing and waste, cutting waste, how to procure insurances, and so on and so forth. I think private equity said, well, hold on a second. We've got a capital constrained market and a general industry that could probably benefit from our business acumen and our tools that we bring to enhancing businesses that we've already done before outside of the law. And law seems to need it just as much, if not more than the others. And now I'll bring your two subjects together. And now with AI, you've got businesses that are at pivotal points, transition points of needing investment, infrastructure, retooling, re-envisioning, reimagining how products are brought to market, all areas where private equity has great history of thriving. So I think, private equity sees it as a monstrous market that, so long as you can manage the regulatory concerns, it's going to open it up. And frankly, as someone who's in the field, provide a lot of opportunity for folks to access growth capital, to access expertise and enhanced delivery of the business side, which would only make us better lawyers and focusing on what we do day to day, serving our client base that we're being tapped upon to or called upon to serve. You know, on the AI side, we've done a lot of speaking on that, as you can imagine, and a lot of internal. You know, we've had an AI subcommittee for over 2 years now. We were one of the earlier adopters as far as a mid-sized firm of Harvey AI. We baited multiple products throughout just to make sure we're staying, with what is best serving our colleagues and our clients. We've in the back end worked with Claude Enterprise to make our business processes better, more efficient. And we're also working with some other tools on time capture, billing, and other functions of the practice of law. So it's here, it's real, it's not an if. I do think from the legal delivery of legal services side, it's still got a ways to go. So it's a tool. It enhances what we do. It makes us better at what we do and more efficient at what we do, but it can't be relied upon. It can't produce product that you just send out. Um, you know, and I think that even that assessment I just gave to you, Alex, is it's it's morphing day by day, right? As it gets better, as the way that it works is modified, hopefully enhanced. And I think the net outlook is that an attorney ultimately will be able to do more, and then a focus on training the younger attorneys on what makes a senior attorney great is not just here's my work product, v your work product. It's what we bring to the equation, those intangibles, the analytical outside of the case law, the situational analytical side of things. Alex may be right, Zach may be wrong, but as we know, the conclusion still sometimes might be somewhere in the middle for other factors that AI may not pick up on, at least not current versions. So I think it's here, it's real. We're focusing on how we train our newer lawyers. We're focusing on how it can enhance efficiency and productivity of an individual attorney while still being very responsible in our use and rollout of new products, because we're moving at a pace we've never seen before. When I was in law school, we used a computer lab. Our home computers were not powerful enough to access Lexis and Westlaw, to all of the evolutions we've seen, everything in between. Darrow Everett's always been, pretty tech forward, not to the point where we were, trying to be the coolest and have the cutting edge, because sometimes it wasn't ready, but always made sure we kept up with all of our, competitive firms, and certainly big law that was important to us. But I think it's going to be the discussion for many years to come. And like I said, even the assessment I made today, as a firm, we're going to stay on top of it daily, because that'll change next week, next month, and certainly next year.
Awesome. What are one or two use cases that you're actually utilizing AI for within the firm?
Um, definitely we use it in well, a lot of areas, but two that I see a lot is one, the initial digestion of large amounts of data, right? So if it's a litigation matter, we get a massive discovery dump. We can't rely on what AI puts out as the assessment of it off the, or just off their reporting or the product we get, but it helps you get a sense of what you have before you, right? So, you get 50,000 documents, you create some parameters, some guidelines. We create what we call a vault, and then we start to ask for questions, ask for assessments, ask for data output from that large universe. We still will then go in and with one of our colleagues, associate or otherwise, and anything that's salient, check. And then over time, depending upon the needs of the case, the demand of the case, go back and check everything. frankly, to make sure nothing else was missed. But going into an assignment or going into a review or analysis with that preliminary is amazing. That really creates an advantage. You move more efficiently through the data. With, again, you think about it, walking into a room with the lights off, walking into a room with the lights on. I'm less likely to trip over things. I'm going to see what's before me. I get a little light shined on the subject. The other area we use it a lot is, let's say, if you put together a great document and then you send it to me and I look at it and I've got some experience that I want to lend to it. I say, okay, great. This is ready for client consumption. Clients paid no less, no more than it would have on an ordinary day. In a matter of minutes, I can have that tool. I write a few sentences so it frames the subject, frames what we're doing, who I represent, what's the issue, and say, what do you think? What did I miss given who I represent, our position in the negotiation, where we are in the transaction? And the AI will give me some feedback where, again, I'm a seasoned, experienced lawyer. Let's say it gives me 10 things to look at. 4 of them I didn't address because nuance-wise, it's not relevant. 2 of them's interesting, not really something I want to do. And then you get a few other points. You think, you know what? I can make it even better. And the additional time to the client is de minimis, but they get yet almost like the third participant in my example that's looking at things in some respects imperfect because they're not a living, breathing person that's involved in that particular negotiation, understanding the nuances or the things that may be imperfect, but still need to be the case, but also perfect from the perspective of its analytical capabilities from the raw data that it's sitting on. So, like I said, it's used as a really great um, check tool for us to make sure there's nothing that human error could have overlooked, while still using all the benefits of a human to make sure we don't just run with something that's not really appropriate for the circumstances. And then, like I said, that turning the light on when you're getting massive amounts of data. Now, there's others in our firm that use it in much more complex ways. Like I said, creating work streams as between various groups of data. But those are the two I would say, like the basic functions that have become day to day for all of us.
Yeah. What do you read, watch, listen to? Do you recommend that others should check out, please?
Oh, well, watch certainly the private equity podcast. That's I recommend people continue to stick with this. You know, I'm a bit of a nerd in regard that I just try to stay current on all kinds of things happening in my industry. So I read a lot of articles daily. I got a countless amount of articles daily that touch on private equity, M&A, and the law space, MSO, and private investment in law space. So I'm a little bit boring in that regard. I do probably every quarter I read the same book over and over again. It's called Execution, the Discipline of Getting Things Done. It's just the kind of book that every time you get done with it, you say, I'm going to go conquer the world. I'm going to take, grow something amazing. And the only thing between me and the goal is executing on it. So that's something that I do a lot. But beyond that, once I put down the articles, once I get the legal work out the door for the client, you're going to find me on a paddle court. And that's where I live outside of the practice.
And if anybody wishes to reach out to you post this podcast, how best do they get in touch, please?
Happy to shoot me an email. It's Z Darrow, my last name Darrow at darroweverett.com. That's DARROWEVERETT.com. Or they can just Google us and you'll find your way to our website and you'll click right on me and it'll connect you to me.
Marvelous. Well, thank you very much for coming on to the Private Equity Podcast, Zachary.
Thanks for having me, and also thanks for creating this forum. It's phenomenal, and it's a really great outlet for the industry. So I'm grateful for you as well.
My pleasure. And thank you very much for everybody for tuning into the Private Equity Podcast. Till the next time, keep smashing it.